अध्ययन ज्ञान शाखा परिवार की तरफ से मैं देवशंकर नवीन श्रीमती अलेसांद्रा मैम का स्वागत करता हूं और आशा करता हूं कि पीछे के 8 दिन आपने अपने ज्ञान वर्धन में बहुत आगे की यात्रा तय कर ली होगी और ये अलेसांद्रा मैम की कृपा ही है कि इन्होंने लगातार 9 दिनों तक हम सबका न केवल आप सबको बल्कि हम दोनों को भी पर्याप्त अनुवाद के भिन्न भिन्न नुआंसेस, भिन्न भिन्न सूक्ष्मताओं से हमें परिचित कराया है। आने वाले दिनों की हम दोनों की जो अध्यापन शैली होगी वह इनके इस योगदान से शायद और भी बेहतर हो। आज आप मैडम का व्याख्यान सुनेंगे, ए बिट ऑफ लूनेटिक, ए बिट ऑफ शमन, द क्राफ्ट ऑफ ट्रांसलेटिंग। अभी अभी हम लोग इसका अनुवाद कर रहे थे कि अनुवाद की संरचना क्या होगी, अनुवाद का शिल्प क्या होगा। तो हम लोग इधर उधर भटक रहे थे, पर अभी उठते उठते मुझे लगा कि ये थोड़ा सा झक्की, थोड़ा सा धर्मधर, अनुवाद का जो धर्म है उसका पालन करते हुए और अपने जुनून पर कायम रहते हुए अब देखें कि अन्य दिनों की तरह आज भी हम लोग मैडम के इस वक्तव्य से लाभान्वित होंगे। आप सबको आज के इस उपलब्धि, आने वाली उपलब्धि की शुभकामनाएं देता हूं और आप सबकी ओर से मैडम का, अलेसांद्रा जी का फिर से स्वागत करता हूं, निवेदन करता हूं कि वे अपनी बात रखें। प्रोफेसर अलेसांद्रा जी।
जी बहुत धन्यवाद। मैं आज अपने बारे में बताऊंगी कि मेरा मतलब जो अनुवाद करने का अनुभव हुआ वो क्या होता है और जो प्रैक्टिस है, किस तरह के प्रॉब्लम है और थोड़े कुछ नमूने बताना चाहूँगी कि मेरा एक्सपीरियंस क्या है इसके बारे में। और ये टाइटल जो है ए बिट ऑफ लूनाटिक, ए बिट ऑफ शामन, ये एक कोटेशन होता है जो बाद में मैं पूरा दिखा दूंगी। और एक मैं आपको अपने बारे में बताने से पहले कुछ इतालवी अनुवादकों के विचार दिखा दूंगी कि वे क्या सोचते हैं कि अनुवाद करने का मतलब क्या होता है। तो जो नमूने मैं बता दूंगी ये है रेत समाधि से जुड़े हुए, क्योंकि मैंने जब इस अनुवाद को कर रही थी उसी समय बहुत समस्याएं हुई। तो मैं सोचती हूँ कि शायद इसको आपको बताने से कुछ आइडियाज होंगे कि मतलब क्योंकि मैं बोलती रहती हूँ कि हर एक बार हम देखना है कि उसी स्थिति में क्या सोल्यूशन है, क्या स्ट्रेटेजी लेना है। तो मैं बता दूंगी कि उसी समय मैं ऐसा क्यों अनुदित किया। तो और वास्तव में आपको इतालवी भाषा नहीं आती, लेकिन कम से कम एक व्यक्ति है जिनको इतालवी भाषा मालूम है, तो इतालवी अनुवाद भी लगाए और हिंदी टेक्स्ट और जो अंग्रेजी अनुवाद है, फ्रांसीसी अनुवाद है और अनुवाद होंगे, अभी मुझे मालूम नहीं। लेकिन जब मैं रेत समाधि का अनुवाद करती थी उस समय मेरे लिए 2 और अनुवाद उपलब्ध थे। ये थे अंग्रेजी और फ्रांसीसी। मैं दोनों भाषाओं को पढ़ सकती हूँ। तो जब जब अनुवाद होते हैं तो मैं सोचती हूँ कि हम हमेशा उनको हमको उन अनुवाद को पढ़ना चाहिए, क्योंकि जो स्ट्रेटजीज होते हैं हम देखते हैं कि अनुवादक ने क्या किया और हम सोचते हैं कि ठीक है, ये अच्छा है, ये इससे मैं सहमत नहीं हूँ, तो हम तो ठीक है, तो शुरू करें। और सबसे पहले we start with the little bit of being lunatic and being a shaman. shaman अभी बात हो रही थी कि हिंदी में क्या होगा, ओझा या तांत्रिक, जो लोग मतलब shaman ट्राइबल समूहों में होता है, अफ्रीका और कम से कम अफ्रीका और लेकिन नेपाल में भी शामन्स होते हैं। तो इसका मतलब है कि उन देवता है और वे देवता से जुड़े हुए हैं या जुड़ी हुई हैं, क्योंकि ये दोनों है, पुरुष और महिलाओं के लिए होता है। फिर देवता अंदर जाता है और वे बोलेंगे, कुछ बोलेंगे। तो ठीक है। Okay, now I switch to English, sorry, but has anybody of you read or seen the movie, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Okay, if you haven't read the book, I mean, it's wonderful because, I think that Douglas Adams, who is the writer of this book, is really, I mean, he's funny. And it's something very hilarious, but very deep. There are a lot of things in this book. And I was asked, why do you always put this photo, this background at the beginning? And this is the Babel Tower. In the culture where I come from, this is the myth that explains why there are so many languages, so I decided to use this. But maybe I don't know if anybody of you, I mean, you are too young to know this, but many, many years ago, the first free system of translation that was made available by Yahoo, was taken by, was called the Babel fish. So it's very strange, but I want to show you a small video. And unfortunately, I could not download it, so I have to go to here, to YouTube. And this is the serial that was made by the BBC. There is also a commercial movie, but I want to show you this. It's about what is the Babel fish.
Excuse me, Paul, but what exactly am I doing with this fish in my ear? It's translating for you.
Okay, so anyway, this is the Babel fish. It's something that anybody would like to have. You have this small fish, you put it in your ear, and then suddenly you can understand all the languages in the world. The fish is translating for you, and it's very funny, in the story. So just go and try to. I put the reference so you can find it on YouTube. So, and it's interesting that, is it back? Okay. So the Babel fish was the name of the first, let's call it, artificial intelligence system for translating. So this is something that I find very funny, because it's the dream, that everybody has. But what we do actually is that we don't have any Babel fish. We have to work hard. And so translating is like a curse. We have to really, struggle with all the problems that we have discussed in the previous classes. So I just want to share with you some of the ideas about translations that are, found in Europe and specifically in Italian culture. This is Italo Calvino. I think he's a very famous Italian writer, so you might have at least heard the name of Italo Calvino. And his idea is that, of course, I'm telling this because we have seen all the theories, and now we are seeing something from, writers and translators, who are like, not doing any theory. They're like reflecting about their own practice. And Calvino was talking about, what happens when I read the text in Italian that I wrote and the translation that is given to me. We were discussing, what you negotiate with the author, So, and he said that, translating is the true way of reading a text, because for an author, reflecting on the translation of one's own text, discussing it with the translator is the true way of reading oneself, of understanding well what one has written and why. And this is very interesting because, you see, we have talked about the need of a collaborative way of translating. And this is exactly what he was doing. Also Umberto Eco was doing always this, just discussing it with the translators. And so it's interesting because for Italo Calvino, he says, having this translation is the best way of reading my own text. Can you believe it? This is I think it's very, very important. This is not Italian, but his family was of Italian origin. And Dante Gabriele Rossetti, he is the founder of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in mid-19th century. And he said that a translation remains the most direct form of commentary. So here again, why am I suggesting this to you? Because I don't want to have this notion that there is a Western way of translation and an Indian way of translation. We have discussed the notion of, translation as commentary, as something that is deeply embedded in the Indian culture. But as you can see, I mean, it's everywhere. I don't believe in this idea of, West and the rest, or East and West. I think that, we should just think that, it's something that people have been doing for a long time. And this is Erdino Pocar, who is a very important Italian translator, and he translated from German. He was a Germanist. So, and I think his ideas, he's really like, somebody whose way of doing translation was really like, a model for everybody who's doing translation in Italy. And the reader for Erdino Pocar, he doesn't only know he doesn't want to know only what the text, the author says, but they want also to know how it is said. And that's why, when you translate, it's not only a matter of communicating a meaning, but it's a more complicated thing. And I think that it's very important that he said that the indispensable qualities of the translator are, alongside humility, honesty. So, and I think this is really like something that we have to learn from him, because he said translating should be a school of morality, because you have to be honest with the text, honest with yourself. And we saw it. It's something that we discussed yesterday. But he said, it's really like, when you manipulate the text, you cannot do it without a reason. You have to do it honestly. He says that if I see that a chapter of 11 pages is reduced to 1.5, I think that the translator is dishonest, because this means that they are like skipping the difficult parts. And we know that very often in literary translation, this used to be the case. I know, a lot of English translations from Hindi, a few decades ago, they were like, cutting out all the difficulties. You make it very plain. And of course, it's not only domesticating, it's also being dishonest. And he also said that I begin with a precise apodictic statement. Translation is impossible. To this, I add another equally frank and precise one. Translation has always been done, translation is done, and translation will always be done. So it's something impossible, but we keep on doing it. So there is something crazy about that. Why are we doing something that is impossible? And another very important Italian thinker, he is like, the master of aesthetics at the beginning of the 20th century, Benedetto Croce. Benedetto Croce, by the way, was also, one of the references for Ramchandra Shukla when he developed his ideas on Hindi Sahitya Ka Itihas. One of, apart from Ruskin, he also had read Benedetto Croce. So there are a lot of references to the ideas of Benedetto Croce. And he said that translation, in any case, it's something that creates something inferior. It's impossible. It always diminishes and spoils the text. And specifically, this happens with poetry. Poetry cannot be translated because when you translate a poetry, you create something else entirely, something totally different. It is, he said, the poetizing of an old, something old in a new soul. And you see that he's speaking of soul. So here is where the shaman, we are going to this idea that it's something that happens inside the translator. We have talked, somebody has, pointed out how important are, the responses of the translator, both rationally and emotionally, and, the psychological approach to the text. So if you are thinking of and also, it's what Spivak has, she's very famous for that, the most intimate act. So you see, even Benedetto Croce comes much earlier than Spivak. And then this is something that, of course, I put this quotation because it's very important. Walter Benjamin's idea of the real translation, he's of the idea that translation must be transparent. But we have seen how this very idea has been discussed and, said that, okay, maybe the translator does not have to be so invisible. I like very much what Umberto Eco said about translation. Translation is a bet. When you bet, you are taking a risk. It's betting, you're making a bet. And he says that it's making a bet on the sense of a text. Because when you translate, of course, he is of the idea that it's not only a linguistic matter, there is a whole culture. And so the entire history of a culture, and this is what assists the translator. But we saw that sometimes it is not like helping the translator, this whole background, it's like a problem. And so that's why, he says, every interpretation, every translation remains a bet. And then this is another Italian translator that I love very much, Sergio Azzeni. And he's from Sardinia, like Gramsci. So he's coming from this peripheral area of Italy. And he says, he's the one that, is saying that he was asked, in an interview by a journal, are translators crazy? And he said, well, if they ask it, it's because they probably have a suspect, they have a doubt that this is the case. And he said, okay, there are crazy translators, but in any case, there is a thread of madness in wanting to do this job. And this is not only because it's poorly paid, but he said, because to translate means believing oneself to be a bit of a shaman, that is endowed with the soul capable of incarnating itself in other people's soul. And I like this very much, also because he said that this happens to the point of losing self-consciousness, which is the idea that, for example, is expressed by Spivak, getting so intimately deep into the text that you become one with the text. And this is something that transcends rationality transcends technical things. When you are a shaman, here is where a lot of, like the emotional response also comes into play. And I'm not going to read all this. You can read it easily at home, but he's like saying that when I translate, I immerse myself to the point of losing some self-consciousness in the head. I immerse myself in the head, in the imagination, in the ideas, in the word use, in the vocabulary of the author. And this makes me feel destroyed. In the end, I'm empty. I am really destroyed by this work, but in return, I have a lot of things. What do I have in return? And he's, giving a list of all the things that he could experience, I have experienced the ascent of Mont Blanc in the guise of a somewhat lunatic Persian noblewoman, because he translated a travel book by a Persian noblewoman going, up to the top of Mont Blanc. And, whenever we translate a book, is like making a journey. And here we can connect with the description, the definition of, translation as a journey that was given by Jhumpa Lahiri reading Gramsci, for example. And so this is what we get, we get back when we lose ourselves, into this deep, getting into the text. And of course, we have the usual translator dilemma that came up, should it be like bringing the text to the reader? And this is, for example, what another important Italian writer thought. Elio Vittorini said that my way of translating was appreciated because I render the writer as if he had been written in Italian directly. But this is, and he's a very important writer, an important translator. Or, as Sergio Azzeni says, should we bring the reader to the text, which is like domesticating or foreignizing? Azzeni, for example, he translated Patrick Chamoisieux, who is a French author from Martinique. He's not a French author from France. So his French is full of Creole words. He was like a very active in the Creolité movement. Creole is this mixed language, yeah, it's like a mixing of, local languages and French. So it's something very, and he says, when I was translating this text, I was faced with the impossible. So I lowered the flag. Lowering the flag means I'm giving up. It's like, okay, मैं हार गया. So because what do I do when you have dialects, when you have non-standard languages? Do you use, for example, he's translating into Italian. Should I use an Italian dialect? This is like a distortion, because if I use an Italian dialect, there are a lot of things that are connected to this very dialect. Like I'm using Maithili, which is a language, not a dialect, but if you compare it to standard Hindi, it is non-standard. But Mithila is a place. If you say Mithila, you have ideas, immediately you have an idea of a place, of a certain culture. So if you do this also with dialects, this is really a distortion. So he decides that he would just, translate idioms as they are. And he says, the reader will be guided from the page to the right interpretation. And when the reader comes across another strange expression, he will have to look for the key in the sense of the whole chapter. So he's like, very, he's convinced, and I think he's true. This is the same thing that I think, that's why I'm quoting this, because, it's like saying something that happened to me also. What do we do? Sometimes you really have to think, okay, this is difficult, But I believe that my reader is intelligent enough to make the sense by reading the whole book, by reading the whole chapter. I mean, the readers are active. We don't have to think the readers as somebody who is passive, just passively reading a page. It's never like that. The readers are actively involved with the text. And so we have to trust them, and also to give them some time, some work, Okay, your homework is read it and try to understand it, So, and here, we come to what happened when I was stuck in the sand of Ret Samadhi. Because, this translation for me was really of Ret, Samadhi. Samadhi, okay, first of all, let me tell you that my connection with Gitanjali Sri is not linked to the Booker Prize. I can show you. She came for the first time to my place in 2005. We both looked very different than, the most recent picture. So, and after 20 years, I happened to be the translator of one of her novels. One of my students has translated the Tirohit into Italian. It has not been published, but it's her dissertation, final dissertation. So, I have been reading and, also writing on Gitanjali Shri's works for a long time. But what happened? When Ret Samadhi was published, it had just come out, and I was here in Delhi, and I met her, and she gave me a copy. And at that time, I read the book, and I said, okay, it's very difficult. I was not, thinking that this is something that I will translate into Italian, because it's really a difficult book. And also the reception here in the Hindi field was not, so. But then, of course, we have the Booker Prize, so you see that there are, many editions of the translation by Daisy Rockwell, and this is the Italian translation. And okay, I would like to spend a few minutes on why did we choose to translate the title, leaving the Hindi, the original Hindi, Ret Samadhi, and then putting a subtitle, which is, you can see, it's Oltre la Frontiera, which means beyond the border. Okay, the Italian translators, it's me and Veronica, but I am the only one talking here, so no, sorry. The Italian translators were not happy with the English book because Samadhi is a very heavy word, because it has many different meanings. It is used in different contexts. And I think that reducing Samadhi to a tomb is something that is not correct, because Samadhi has also the meaning of being like the memorial, of like a saint. Yeah, but it has many more meanings, and the burial site of a saint is called a samadhi, for example. But if we reduce samadhi to an architectural thing and thinking of like a tomb made of sand, I don't think we are really translating something that is the meaning of Ret Samadhi. I don't know if for you the expression Ret Samadhi is easy. I think even in Hindi it is not an easy thing, because when you say Ret Samadhi is not one of the common ideas regarding also, meditation and, leaving the body, the Samadhi is also like leaving the body. So we had at that time two existing editions in different languages. One was the English one, and the other one was the French one that has been done by Annie Monteau. And we saw that Annie Montaut had made a different choice. She did the same thing that we then chose to do. She maintained the Hindi words, and then she added au-delà de la frontière, which is like beyond the border. We like this very much, and because we decided that maintaining the word samadhi, which is it's of course difficult. Not all people can understand it, but at least some people who, like for example, in Italy, there are a lot of people who practice yoga, and they, you know, have this sort of like meditation. So they might be acquainted at least to this kind of, you know, connotation of samadhi, and of course, the meaning of this expression remains very fuzzy. It's not clear. But we thought, well, then the reader can have an idea that this is not an easy reading, because from the title, you can see that it's not clear. You know, you have to think about, you know, this. And so, I mean, we are sort of hinting at the fact that, look, you are going to start a difficult journey. But go ahead, you know, difficult journeys are always, you know, very exciting. And then the presence, the meanings, Ret Samadhi itself, I think even in Hindi, is not clear for everybody, because what does it mean? Is it like somebody who is buried in sand, or is it like somebody who has to do with meditation on the sand, in the sand? Pata nahi. This is not clear. And then we had the problem of, you know, how do we then deal with the problem that, you know, we have to explain somehow. We are relying on the ability of our readers to understand what samadhi is. They will finally do. If they read the whole thing, you know, the whole text, they will finally get an idea. But we have to do things. And so we decided that, okay, samadhi appears 26 times in the Hindi text. It's 26 times. And so we decided that in the first time this word happens, we decided to give an explanation. Because we said we are not translating it, but we are, like, you know, giving you some hints. And the first time we suggested that there is the notion of concentration, you know, of meditation. And there is also this idea of something, because the first time is Ret mein samadhi hili hai. So there is something that is hili hai, so moves. So there is also something that can be visualized as like a tomb. So there are both meanings. At that time, we decided to go for the manipulation of the text, clarification. We used this. And then, of course, we didn't do it every time. There are a lot of instances where we simply let the expression Ret Samadhi. Other times we let Samadhi, and then we added some other explanations. Other times we just thought that it was clear from the whole sentence what this meant. And so each and every time, in 26 different occurrences, we went for different kind of solutions. So as you see, this is what I have been, you know, repeating, that each and every time we had like long discussions, like, you know, should we do this? Should we do that? Sometimes we were happy with our choice. Sometimes we were not very happy. But in the end, I think, I mean, in the end, you always have to choose something. And so we decided to leave this in the title, and then having different strategies within the text. So the problem with translating from, Hindi into Italian, we have, pointed out the contested position of Hindi, because it's like, what we think is modern standard Hindi, but under the umbrella expression Hindi, we know that there are many, many other things, many languages, many dialects. And then, there is also this a notion of Hindi as a national language. It's connected to the heritage, of the historical shaping of Manak Hindi. And so now Hindi is the language of power because it's the language of the government. In the Hindi literature, we can see it has been the language of the higher castes for a long time. But at the same time, we have seen how, Hindi is something, Manak Hindi, the standard Hindi, in some of the most important writers, I'm only mentioning some of the 20th century writers like Krishna Sobdi, Rahima Sumrasa, Krishna Baldevaid, Nirala, we can see that other languages were very important in their activity as writers. And so we have to maintain these ideas, all these problems, and we also have to be aware that there are all the other, let's say, marginalized varieties, the ones that are used by marginalized communities. How do we translate all this into Italian? How do we do it? This is really a problem. So I think this novel is really important because Gitanjali Shree's writing is in a way contravening the mainstream in English culture. And she always complains about the fact, I remember even the first time she came to Italy, they were asking, why are you writing in Hindi? And it's like, why do I have to justify the fact that I'm writing in my Indian language, even if my Hindi is not the pure variety, but it's my language? Do I have to justify the fact that I'm writing in my language? Because most of the persons in Italy expect, Indians to be fluent with English, and so if you want to be famous, you should write in English. Why not? But she chooses to contravene this, write in Hindi, and so she's like choosing, to contrast, to contravene the English culture. But she is like taking into her variety of Hindi also some variations, some variants, linguistic variations of the new Aryan languages that are subsumed under the Hindi label, like Bhojpuri, Urdu, and so on. So she is at the same time doing also this. Like, I'm not going for English, but I'm not also going for Shuddh Hindi. And at the same time, she's putting a lot of English words inside this text. So what she's doing is like a challenge to the Deshi culture. She's like saying, look, if the Deshi culture is something that sticks to these traditional codes without registering the fact that today, if I go to Delhi, people use a very mixed language. So this is like a sterile language. It doesn't produce anything. And so she also takes she's rejecting English, but at the same time introducing the subcultures of English that are used in India nowadays. So that's why this language is really complex. So what do we do? And here I'm giving you some examples. Is anybody who wants to read the Hindi for me aloud? Please, some student, somebody who wants to read out aloud, you can come here. I can give you the printed version. Please, come here. You can get you can get the phone, the microphone, and
खुदाई तो खुदाई है, खुदा भी खोदना भी, जब सब कुछ और भी वो निकालना है, रेत और मिट्टी से, जल और हवा से, पुरानी हड्डियां और कहानियां खुदाई में और खुदाई में अवतरित होती हैं।
हिंदी में क्या होता है कि खुदाई खुदाई, लेकिन ये दोनों शब्द एक ही नहीं होते हैं, नुक्ता होना चाहिए, है ना? So in Hindi, we have something that has become homophone because you now pronounce it as khudai khudai. But if you pronounce it as it should be, it is khudai and khudai. Somebody who's good in Persian, maybe you can, I mean, because I'm not good at, but there is this difference, you know? And so, but because somebody decided that nuktas, you know, it's just a dot, I mean, it's not necessary, and people know how to pronounce words, then we have this. So, somehow, if you read this, you can understand that the meaning is not the same. It's the same sound, but it's two different meanings. Okay? And so I listed here all the differences. You have khudai, you have kudai, you have huda, you have kuda. And then you have kodna, which is, you know, and so this is something that, like, you know, is taken from two different traditions, you know, linguistic archives that are available to the Hindi reader. And for you, it's clear. But what do I do in Italy? In Italian, we don't have this kind of double heritage. So we had, you know, anyway, to find, I mean, something that, I mean, this is where translation is impossible. I mean, what do? I cannot leave khudai, khudai. I cannot leave something like that. I have to find some solution. What we did is to find some other, because there is also, you know, this repetition, so the sound, I mean, you repeat over and over the same sound, you know, it's homophone, and it comes 4 or 5 times in a very short sentence. So what do we do in Italian? What we did is to find another solution, and saying that, for example, we have kodna, it's scavare, and finding is, there is one of the many verbs that are finding, that is scovare, scavare, scovare. So it's similar. So we went for something that is ma scavare e arrivare al creatore, scavare e scovare Dio, and creatore is a synonym for God. But as you see, it has a rhyme, arrivare al creatore. So we had to recreate the sound somehow. So when Gitanjali, she kept on saying, okay, just be creative, be creative. And we started thinking of this kind of thing, you know. So we modified the text because it was impossible to do it exactly as it is in Hindi.
जैसे इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेटर ने इसमें अर्थ दिया है, हिंदी का कोई अर्थ ही नहीं है, ये इस सेंटेंस का कुछ भी अर्थ नहीं।
अर्थ है आप यदि उपन्यास को पढ़ेंगे तो कोई अर्थ होगा, ये मैं मानती हूँ, लेकिन ठीक है, तो आगे। So this very play, you know, with sounds goes on also in again and again, and it's English. It's interesting because it becomes even more complicated because she introduces another sound. You know, she's playing with this khuda, khuda, and so on, and she goes to khudi and khudi. So, and she's like playing with these meanings and sounds, and here she's like, you know, giving a very strong, she's giving a criticism on, you know, the colonial attitude towards like archaeology and, you know, the texts and so on. And this is like a passage. I mean, we are not going to analyze the text, but this is very interesting. There are passages where there is a very strong criticism, you know, critique post-colonial critique, let's call it like that. And so she's using this, we are not going to read the whole thing, but here the problem is that you have this notion of kodna, and then you have again kudai, and then you have kudi, which is like, that is playing kudi, that is like egoticism, and kudi, that is like digged out in the feminine form, but it's a past participle. Here again in Italian, it's really difficult to do it. So we created something again that was playing with sounds, with the notion of scratching and digging, and we found verbs. And it's like in Italian, it sounds something like graffiando e raschiando, raschiando e graffiando. So we are like repeating words. They are not exactly the same words that you have in Hindi, but we tried with harsh sounds, because graffiare, raschiare, it's harsh in Italian. And then this leads to the notion of egocentrismo, which is like the ego, so the kudi. And then, okay, this is one of the solutions that we found. So, okay, why doesn't he go? Okay, so I'm not, it's in, okay, this is another very, just a minute, because I think I skipped. Okay, this is another passage, but I'm not going to read it. Why does, okay, just a minute. There should be the Hindi version. Okay, this is a long passage. I want you to read at home and try to, found all the sounds, onomatopoeia, alliteration, the music that is there. And here it's, I will just give you an example. It's in this sounds. I didn't highlight them, so in Hindi. Yeah. Far, 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 farak, farak. I mean, this is, if it's here. Can you see it? It's here. Huh? It's sound. Huh. Yeah. It's, but in Italian, how do I translate? If I translate the meaning, it doesn't have any meaning. So what we chose to do, and I'm just giving, okay, it's we tried to. It's the first one that is in bold letters. We used this notion of the fru. This is the sound, and what we chose to do is to add something that alludes to a very famous Italian poem by a very famous Italian poet, and it's this idea of the rifrulla fra le fratte. There is this poem that, I mean, now probably youngsters don't study it at school any longer, but it's a very famous poem by Pascoli. So if I write fru fra le fratte, it's like a quotation, it's a literary quotation. We decided to introduce this. Of course, this is a totally different thing. There is nothing like that in Hindi. But we thought that if we use this fru, rifrulla fra le fratte, we are trying to recreate the sound that you have in the Hindi. This one, I don't know why it's stuck here, okay? The far, farak. This is, it's something that, these are sounds that you don't have in Italy. You have to create them in a different way. And another thing that we did, and this was something that I think it was last year, I gave a lecture about that, how we had to solve the problem that comes at the very beginning of the novel, to go from nahi to nahi. Nahi, main nahi utungi. And this goes on for a long time, and then it comes again and again, and then it becomes the old lady who is the protagonist of the novel. She's, like using this expression, and she finally says, main nahi utungi. So she passes from, so in English, it's not difficult because you have no and you go to new, and no to new, okay. But from no to nuova, because in Italian you have to add a syllable, have a different sound. how do you do it? We had to find a solution, and then we decided to use this nova. We play because this old lady has become like a child. She uses the words that children use, just pronouncing the words in a different way. And so we decided to do this also in Italian. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but this is what we came with this. And this is another, this is something, for example, I remember we spent a lot of time only on this expression. Hava bahurupya hai, smriti dard icha, yakin jalba yasin, hasin, kalpana ambarin. So it's simple, it's a very short sentence, but it's full of problems for the translator because it has a rhythm, it has some rhymes, and the word bahurupya, it's a very complicated word because it has many meanings, and it has the meaning of something that has different rupa, it has different forms, but it's also something cheating. So we decided to translate it with two words, and instead of doing only one adjective, we put two. And we decided to put multiforme e truffaldino, which means multiform, with many shapes, and truffaldino means like cheater, an imposter. So hava bahurupya hai. And then we tried to find a rhythm for the rhyme, trying to find words that translate the meaning of the Hindi words, but that create another kind of rhyme. So I gave you the different rhyme style, the sequence that you have in the Hindi, and the Italian is different, but still, it makes sense because it goes like memoria, afflizione, desiderio, convinzione, bellezza, attrazione, profumo, immaginazione. So you see that we create a rhyme and a rhythm. It's different from the original, but this is the way we solve this. And I can tell you, it took us maybe 2 days to come to this translation because we were never happy with the translation we had. And this is another, and I think it's really interesting, this passage. There is in the final part of the novel, you have like the assembly of crowds, and there is a man who is dreaming of this. He's looking at all these crowds. Actually, he's dreaming, but the assembly of crowds is really happening, and you have this thing. We come from a chapter where you have like the enumeration, the listing of all the different kind of saris. Well, not all, but a lot of different kind of saris that you have in India. And it's like many, many different kind of saris, and one of them is the Paithani sari. So it's a name, it's culturally specific, it's linked to a place. You cannot really translate, you have to, it's Paithani sari. But here you have the character, the main character, who is Bare Bahai, and Bare is thinking about his sister, and he says, "Bedhange kapron ka shauk hai, behan ko, kuch pedal hai." And there are all these, the young crowds are taking notes. It's like students who are taking notes. They're like in a class and they're taking notes of what is being said, or thought by Bare. And so the young crowds write down Pedli, Kavone note kiya, Paithani, Kavine sakt se kaha. So, because he's like talking about the Paithani sari, and he's thinking of how beautiful this sari is and how pedal is his sister, because she's always wearing not elegant things. Yeah, it's also like being a little bit crazy and so on. So the English translation, you can read it there. It's like just trying to maintain the sound, and like, you know, she is patently ridiculous, and so it's like patently and patently. The French one goes for the word paysan. Paysan means like Gambari. So it's like, oh, she's very paysan, and they write down paysan and the kauvi, and you see this is like an invented word because there are kauve and there is a kauvi, like the old she crowd. She corrects them, saying, look, she's talking about the paitni sari. What do we do in Italian? We had many different solutions. We wanted to maintain the sound, and so we could have many different things, and in the end we chose to use pettini. Pettini is like pettini, pettini, it's, you know, something that sounds more or less the same, but how do you put the word pettini, which is combs? How do you put this word into this sentence? Because we are talking about something else. And finally, we chose to introduce a muhavra, you know, an idiomatic expression, a sort of proverb that is not one of the major proverbs that you have in Italy, but it's something that goes like chi ha lana cardi e chi ha lino pettini. And here pettini is not used. Pettini has two meanings. One is the plural of the word pettine, it's like combs, and pettini is also like the subjunctive, like an imperative form of pettinare, which is combing oneself. And it means, this idiom means, what can you do? She is stupid, she is not elegant, you know, she has this passion for bedange capre. But what can you do? You do what you have. This is the meaning of this idiom. Of course, it's something that we introduced. I mean, it is not in the Hindi, but for the Italian reader, at least you have this rhythm like chi ha lana cardi, chi ha lino pettini, pettini annotarono, petani corresse la corva. So it means, you know, you have this sound that is very much the same. And we had come up with at least 3 or 4 different kind of solutions, and I was reading them out loud to Gitangeli on the phone, and I was asking her, you don't know Italian, okay, but tell me, which is the one that you like most? And she sort of liked the pettini one, because she said, you know, it sounds good. So we chose to go for this solution. But you see, it's really a highly manipulative solution. And but in this case, we thought this was the best thing. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of neologisms. For example, in this section regarding the crows, you have these words that I don't think they are standard Hindi. I think this is the first time that I read them in Hindi, and I had to create something more or less the same in Italian, because there is nothing like that in Italian. So Kauvi is the female form of kauva, and I don't know if, I think this is something that is not common in Hindi. You don't use the feminine form of this word. So we also, this is also in Italian. You have corvo, you don't have corva, which is the feminine, but we used it, una corva anziana. So we created this word. And then we also created words like kauvi hriddae became corvitudine. And this is something that you don't find in any Italian dictionary. So we really had to become creative. And this is what we did. And okay. Then there is the problem. I mean, for us it was a problem. How do you translate the English sentences that are in Hindi, and for example, for the English translator, this was a problem, because for us, I mean, we decided to live in English, what was written in Devanagari, but it was English, and then to sort of create a sort of macaronic English for the English forms, you know. But when you translate into, oh, okay, I think there should be also the Hindi version. Where is the Hindi version? Sorry, this is the Hindi version. You know, you can see, you know, granny, naughty girl. I mean, we left it in English. But what do you do with the other? Chilla, zara, din, challis. Because this is, he's the young man who is using this sort of, you know, very mixed language, and he, like, you know, it's written like this. Yeah, it's like this. He's singing, and he's, like, you know, making fun of all these things. And then he's also taking the guitar and playing the guitar and making it into a song. What do we do in Italian? Here again, you know, I mean, awesome granny, I can leave awesome granny in English. And I want my readers, if they don't know English, to go and check in Google Translate. They can do it. This is standard English. But they cannot do it for other things, you know. And so we decided, I don't know if it will, okay. We decided to leave the English, you can see it over there, granny, naughty girl, this is English. And then instead to try to recreate something that is not Italian, you know, and not Hindi, and leave, for example, when he is singing, just chill, chill. And then we translated, and something of that is translated, something of that is not translated. We mixed, because it's mixed in the original, and we left it mixed also in the Italian. So this is one of the things. And this is the thing that I think is very interesting in the writing, that she's also disobeying the orthographic rules of the signs. I mean, when we learn Hindi phonetics, we know that in Akshar, you have, in Hindi, you have akshars, and when you have a nasal sound, it has to be the homophonic nasal with the consonant that you are using. But what do we do with this and? A, n, d. This is not accepted. This is something totally different. It's also different from the usual pronunciation of the English conjunction. It is and, it's not and. But she's writing something like this, and we have to pronounce it. So I think this is really, she's very naughty, she's very disobedient, and that's probably why, you know, it's difficult to read this thing, because it's not catering to anybody's expectation. But we have to, you know, somehow take into account that this is the text that we are translating. And does anybody want to come here and start reading out the first sentences of this passage? It's the last part. I mean, it's I'm almost done. So it's a little bit, it's small, but if you come here, maybe you can read it, you know. पहला सेंटेंस और चार लाइंस.
उसे तरह तरह से बजाने न लगी, यूं माँ अपनी नाक के संग करने लगी है. लंबी लंबी श्वास, निश्वास, गहराती और लंबी.
Oh, maybe this is my misprint. I don't know. I will check it. Sorry, because I have printed it out. So.
निश्वास, गहराती और ध्वनियाँ उसमें जोड़ती, उनमें जोड़ती. आ आ आ आ आ आ आ आ आ ओ, जम्हाई में मुंह फाड़ते हुए. ऊ ऊ ऊ ऊ, ई ई ई, उमा, कमर झुलाते हुए. ई आ आ आ आ आ, कड़ी उठा खाकर इस दीवार पर धूप और हवा छलकाते हुए कान में उंगली डाले कस कस खुजाते हुए अपने बदन के अंदर
Okay, we can stop here. But as you can see, I mean, I think we need somebody who's good in acting to recite. This is something that has to be recited. It has to be read, not only like, akshar by akshar. It has to be read performing it. So we had the problem of what we do with the Italian, of course, and we did the same. So we had this oh, and it's like, this is a woman, the body is speaking, it's the sound of the body. She is trying to put on the piece of paper, on the page, she is recreating the sound, but the sound has to be spoken. You have to get that's, when we talk about the dhvani, you have to not only read with your eyes, you have to listen to it. And this is why this is really, difficult. Because
feminine in nature, these are the sounds that are women they generally make.
Because this is the old woman, but anyway, I think we should be able to perform this. And so my conclusion is that if you really want to enjoy Ret Samadhi, you should breathe and read it loud. Because, you have to savor the process of reading as much as, the meaning, the narration. Otherwise, you are losing it. And Veronica and I, we were like, spending hours trying to read out our translation because we think that we tried, to do the same and find solutions that could be like recreating this sort of rhythm and sound. And here is the reason why I think that translating prose can be as difficult as translating poetry when we think of this kind of problems. And this is particularly evident in the case of this novel, but I am sure that there are I know a lot of other texts that are in prose, but there is this thing. And when they are translated without this idea that you have to read them out loud, that's not the good thing. I think even Nirmal Verma, you have to read it. I always do it. Any translation that I do, I finally read it out loud. That's why I sound a little bit crazy, because I'm just, walking around in the room and maybe, some other people are there and I'm like, an actor, trying to perform. But this is what I think should be done when we translate any kind of text. Of course, at least for literary translation. So I will just stop here. I hope it was not too boring for you. And I am also writing something about all these, problems of translating into Italian. And supposedly it will be published in Hindi, but I don't know when. Sometime it will be done. But, it's in the process. So, and this is something that, now here I only have the English version, but we are trying to write it also in Hindi. Okay? So, thank you.
बुकर प्राइज दोबारा मिलता है
क्या?
बुकर प्राइज दोबारा मिलता है?
दोबारा क्यों?
एक ट्रांसलेशन पर मिल रहा है, तो दूसरे ट्रांसलेशन पर भी दूसरी भाषा
मुझे नहीं मतलब जो बुकर प्राइज है वो सिर्फ अंग्रेजी ट्रांसलेशन के लिए होता है. What is the Booker book? Sorry. No, but I think he's asking if one can get another translation in another language can get prize. I have no idea. There must be prizes also for Italian translations. I don't know, but Italian is not a language, you know, that is so important. मुझे नहीं मालूम, लेकिन पुरस्कार तो होते हैं, लेकिन आमतौर पर वे मेजर लैंग्वेजेस से, मेजर भाषाओं से, जैसे कि फ्रेंच, अंग्रेजी, इटली मतलब हिंदी ये मतलब बहुत अजीब भाषा है, दूर होती है। हिंदी कौन बोलता है इटली में, किसी को नहीं मालूम। मुझे समझाना है कि देखिए हिंदी मतलब भारत की राजभाषा होती है और बहुत लोगों से बोली जाती है। अच्छा कितने, मैं बोलती है कि कम से कम 500 मिलियन कितना होगा मुझे नहीं मालूम, लेकिन करोड़ में पता नहीं, आपको मालूम होगा। 50 करोड़ हैं, 50 करोड़ लोगों से, और वे देखते हैं हाँ सही बात, हाँ। लेकिन एक बार एक समाचार पत्र में लिखा गया कि हिंदी एक an obscure dialect. I remember that I wrote a letter to this journal saying, look, I mean, you are very stupid, you don't know anything. Hindi is not an obscure dialect, but you know, there are these nationalistic people who think that we should only speak in Italian and, you know, maybe Italian dialects, but not out of our national boundaries. So that's another reason why I like Red Samadhi so much, because it's all about crossing boundaries, any kind of border. So, yeah. कोई सवाल है?
यस मैम। मैम, जब कोई उपन्यासकार अपने तरीके से शब्द गढ़ना शुरू कर देता है, जैसे ये पगली है, पगली, जैसे पैदल, हाँ या पैदल है तो उसको पैदली कह रहे हैं, या फिर कोई प्रेम में है तो वो अपने तरीके से, या फिर बहुत ज्यादा गुस्सा है तो जो कि वो शब्दकोश में नहीं है और आम बोलचाल में भी नहीं है, लेकिन वो एक भाव दशा में जो है उसको एक पर्सन के लिए प्रदर्शित किया गया है। तो ऐसे में फिर अनुवादक के लिए कितना जो है चुनौतीपूर्ण रहता है अनुवाद करना, या फिर जैसे यहाँ पे जो आप अभी गीतांजलि श्री मैम का दिखा रहे थे, तो वहां पे कितना जो है दिक्कतें रही, खास स्पेसिफिक शब्द को लेकर?
दिक्कत और चुनौतियां बहुत होती है, इसीलिए हम थोड़ा सा पागल होते हैं, क्योंकि हम अनुवाद करना चाहते हैं। हम इतनी चुनौतियों को क्यों ले लेंगे? हम पागल होते हैं। हाँ, हो सकता है। इस तरह का अनुवाद वास्तव में असंभव होता है, लेकिन फिर भी हम अनुवाद करते हैं।
में बोलचाल के उसमें पैदली सुनाई नहीं देता, या फिर शब्दकोश में भी उस तरीके से नहीं है, तो अब पैदली के लिए अलग से हम कहाँ से उसको कैसे समझेंगे? तो
लेकिन आप यदि पूरा पेज पढ़ लेंगे तो आपको मतलब पता चलेगा कि इसमें क्या होता है, कि ये क्यों होता है। तो इसीलिए मैंने कहा कि जो पाठक है, मतलब शायद एक ही शब्द में अर्थ नहीं होगा, लेकिन पूरे पेज में, पूरे चैप्टर में तो
है। मैम, वो आपका कहना ठीक भी है
जी,
लेकिन कई बार वो शब्द पर आकर चीजें रुक जाती हैं, वो पूरे संदर्भ से नहीं समझा जा सकता है, या जो हम संदर्भ से समझते हैं वो एक बड़े जो है फलक से जो है समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, लेकिन स्पेसिफिक होना भी बहुत जरूरी होता है।
हाँ, और इसीलिए मैं बोलती रहती हूँ कि हमको थोड़ा सा मैनिपुलेटिव और क्रिएटिव होना चाहिए। जब तक हमारा जो मैनिपुलेशन होता है इसी कारण होता है, क्योंकि कोई अनुवाद नहीं होता तो हम क्या करेंगे? हम यदि टेक्स्ट नहीं मैनिपुलेट करेंगे तो कोई अनुवाद नहीं होगा, क्योंकि बस शब्द और मतलब लैंग्वेज टू लैंग्वेज, वर्ड बाय वर्ड ये नहीं होगा, तो हम क्या करेंगे? इसीलिए मतलब हाँ, चुनौती है और मतलब जो मतलब चुनौती करना है, और लेकिन हमको हर बार को न को रास्ता मिलेगा कि अच्छा ऐसा करेंगे वो करेंगे, और फिर इसीलिए उम्बर्तो एको ने कहा कि हमेशा वो एक क्या है, शर्त है, बेट, यू आर बेटिंग, शर्त, हम एक शर्त करते हैं, आई बेट दिस विल वर्क।
मैम एक दूसरा सवाल है इसी पे कि जैसे आप बियॉन्ड द बाउंड्रीज की बात कर रहे हैं, तो क्या इस तरीके से जैसे शब्द जो है, इस तरीके से क्या ये एक तरह से ये जो शब्द ये टूट रहा है क्या, मतलब आगे की तरफ इस जैसे एक भाषा का भी एक जो है एक सीमा है, क्या उसको वो लांघ रहा है क्या इस तरीके से प्रयोग करके, जैसे मैम ने किया है पैदली?
हाँ. Okay, this I say in English because it's, I think borders are there, but they are not dividing. When there are borders, okay, apparently there is a border, but a border is always a place where people come and go. So, yeah, so of course there is a border in language, but for example, I give you an example in Italian literature. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a movement, a literary movement that is called futurism. And these were people who were like, very much in favor of modernity, technology, and they said, we have to break the border of Italian language, and so they were writing something like zang, zang, tum, tum. And it's difficult to write it because these are sounds. And zang zang tum tum, how do you write it? You will write it somehow, I can write it in another way. They were writing like zang zang tum tum. And then how do you read it? This is really crossing the border of a language. So if you translate this into Hindi, okay, good luck. I don't know what you will do. I mean, but you can either say it's not translatable, so I'm not translating it, or you can find a way and cross the border of your own language. This is what we did. We tried to invent something that has a meaning in Italian. Sometimes it doesn't have a meaning, it has a sound. And this is what we were looking for, the sound, more than the meaning. And, it was said in one of the lectures that you always lose something and you always gain something. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
मैम, आपने हमारे साथ भी अपना अनुभव साझा किया एज ए ट्रांसलेटर, तो मेरा सवाल यह है कि कैन थ्योरी हेल्प ट्रांसलेटर, मतलब अगर अनुवाद के जो सिद्धांत हैं वो ट्रांसलेशन करते समय वो हेल्प करते हैं, या फिर अनुभव के द्वारा भी कोई अच्छा ट्रांसलेटर हो सकता है?
I think that theory is useful for a translator because when you make your choice, you can refer to all the things that you have studied. And for example, it helps you understanding what you are doing. Like, when I am manipulating the text, it helps me being aware that I am doing this. And somebody has explained that, okay, you can do it, but look, there are some dangers. So, and this is important, like, the fact that foreignization and domestication, there have been so many discussions, and this is something that we do every time. But if you know the theory, then I think you have a deeper knowledge of the process that you are putting into action. Then, of course, it doesn't mean that you have to think of Venuti and dream of Spivak every time you read a novel. Sometimes, though, you are stuck in a page and you can remember, look, this is a case that, is very similar to what this and this scholar or that scholar was saying. And so you can find maybe a reply if you just go and see what they have suggested. Or sometimes you can think, look, okay, this scholar would suggest this and that, but I don't think it works. I have to find something different. And of course, I mean, translation has always been done without too many theories, but I mean, now we have theories. So I think, as I said often, that we have to put together, theory and praxis. You have to be both a scholar of translation and a translator. If you only do theory without knowing what it means, to spend 2 days trying to find pettini, pattini, and I don't remember, there was a platani. We have these three, What do you choose? You have this pedli, and you have paitani, and then in Italian we have to find a sound, and we went with these 3 words, platani, which is a tree. Platani is many trees, okay? A certain kind of trees. And then we had pattini, which is skates. It's pattini. It sounds good, but how can I put skates into that sentence? It's impossible. And then we had pettini. And I think we had many more, but in the end we had to choose among, one of these 3 solutions. And so it was like, we were like just repeating this and trying to write different solutions. And then of course, if you never do this and you only think of theory, then it's difficult to understand what translation is really. I mean, as a craft. And that's why, I really feel that sometimes I felt really like a shaman, I had to let it come into my soul, and possess me, I had to be possessed by this text in order to find a way to speak it out in Italian. It's not something rational. It's something that comes with, emotion and, really, getting very intimate with the text. I mean, this happened to me many, many times, but not only with Ret Samadhi, but in this case, it was really a big challenge. I mean, for me, it was really very hard. For Veronica too. I mean, for both of us.
There is an English idiom, raining cats and dogs.
Yes.
It's expressed as raining old ladies and sticks in Welsh. And I find it quite interesting. My question is like, my readers will never know about these idioms if I translate them fluently into Hindi, like musladhar barish hona. But like raining old ladies and sticks is something which is quite, amusing, and I want my readers to know about this expression. So when you want to move the text to the, when you want to move the reader to the author, then you prefer domestication. So what's your strategies when you want to move your readers to the author?
Well, it depends. In this case, if you really want to let the reader know that there is this kind of strange expression, you can translate word by word. It's exactly what Atseni was doing, when he was translating. I had you will find it in the full, let me just find, okay, I'm trying to find the, right slide. Where is it? It's very slow. I don't know why my okay, now I find it. Okay. It's somewhere here. Here. He says that he translated word by word a Creole idiom that sounds, I have it in English here, it was in Italian. I am translating this from Italian, but anyway. It's like piecing on the violin to make the Spanish play. Oh, this is really very weird. But he decided to leave it there because he said the whole page will lead the reader to understand what it means. And For example, and this is also what, for example, Theme Parks does when he's an English author who writes in English, but he lives in Italy. He has lived in Italy for a long time. And he was describing the kind of language he was using with his children, who would speak English at home, but Italian, at school and so on. And they had this sort of like private language, and he would say something in English like, and goodbye, buonanotte signori, and good night to the music players. I mean, in English, if I say something like that, what do you think? What does it mean? Doesn't mean anything. Good night to the music players. It's an Italian idiom, buonanotte ai suonatori, that they were using, translating it into English because it created something. For them, the meaning was clear. If I use it in a translation, it's not clear. But as I told you, sometimes it's the whole chapter that gives you the meaning. And so that's why you have to believe that your reader is active, and they will find a way to understand what you are meaning. So sometimes this is not needed because it's such a common idiom, like raining cats and dogs, that you can find an equivalent, something that is used in the same situation by Hindi speakers. In Italian, I would say piove a catinelle. So we have something. It's different, but it's the same kind of. In that situation, Italian people would say something like that. So but you can choose what is the best solution for you. And it depends on the text, because sometimes, like for example, you are translating something that is specifically focused on the Welsh situation, and so you want to keep this kind of different flavor. It's not standard English, it's like a different kind of English, so it makes sense. But if you just do it without any reason, then it's, well, I don't know, it's like too much far-fetched.
मैम आपने स्टार्टिंग में कहा था कि पोइट्री कांट बी ट्रांसलेटेड, कविता
मैंने नहीं कहा,
हाँ, आपने किसी का रेफरेंस दिया,
ने कहा।
आपने किसी का रेफरेंस दिया और आपने कहा कविता अनुवाद करने से घटिया होती है। तो मेरा सवाल ये है, और आपने एक और बात इसके बाद किसी और का कि अच्छा अनुवाद वही है जिसमें टेक्स्ट जो है वो सेंस के साथ हो। तो मैम गद्य को लेकर तो हम सीधा सीधा अनुवाद कर लेते हैं, लेकिन जहाँ पद्य की बात आती है, कविताओं की बात आती है, तो वो कौन सी बातें हैं जो एक ट्रांसलेटर को परेशान करती हैं कि वो एक अच्छी कविता को दूसरे भाषा में ट्रांसलेट नहीं कर पाता, या उसे किन चीज़ों से परेशानी महसूस होती है करते वक्त, और उसके क्या कारण है। और मैम एक और बात, जैसे कि कुछ दिन पहले यहाँ पर एक बेंगालन गर्ल थी, उन्होंने कहा था रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर वाला वो देकर कि पहले उन्होंने बांग्ला में पढ़ा और उसके बाद उन्होंने इंग्लिश में पढ़ा, तो दोनों वर्जन्स में जो डिफरेंस थे उससे उन्हें बहुत तकलीफ हुई। तो मैम अभी क्या है कि कुछ सालों पहले जैसे एक गाना आया था नाटू नाटू करके, इंडिया से बाहर बहुत चला, इंडिया में भी बहुत चला, तो लोगों को गाना तो अच्छा लगा लेकिन उसका मीनिंग नहीं समझ में आया। तो मैम अगर उस चीज़ का कभी, जैसे उसका एक हिंदी वर्जन भी आया था नाचो नाचो करके, लेकिन लोग उससे उतना ना जुड़ करके जो ओरिजिनल नाटू नाटू वर्जन है उससे ही जुड़े, तो मैम क्या ये भाषा के मूल को दर्शाता है कि जो किसी भी चीज़ का जो मूल है उसको लोग ज़्यादा एक्वायर करना चाहते हैं, या यहाँ पे ट्रांसलेशन क्या फेल हुआ है, या आप इसको ये मानेंगे कि जो किसी चीज़ का जो प्रदर्शित करने का तरीका है वो उसके मूल भाषा में बेहतर है? क्या यहाँ पे अनुवाद गड़बड़ आप मानेंगे या नहीं मानेंगे, मेरा ये सवाल है।
मैंने तो कहा कि मेरे अनुसार कविता और गद्य का अनुवाद करने में कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, क्योंकि जैसे कि अभी मैंने कहा इस तरह की प्रॉब्लम्स गद्य में भी होते हैं। यदि मैं ठीक से समझी तो आपका प्रॉब्लम है कि हम जब प्रकाशक के लिए अनुवाद करते हैं कौन सा चॉइस करेंगे, कि जैसे कि फ्रॉम दोनों टेक्स्ट छाप देंगे कि ओरिजिनल और अनुवाद दोनों, ये बहुत अच्छी बात है, जब मैं पोइट जैसे कि जसिंता केरकेता की कविताओं का अनुवाद जब मैंने किया तो उस समय हम दोनों हिंदी और इतालवी टेक्स्ट दोनों लगाया। लेकिन ये मतलब कभी कभी ये नहीं हो सकता है क्योंकि इसका मतलब है कि किताब बहुत मोटी हो जाएगी, है ना। आप जैसे कि एक किताब नहीं है, 2 किताबें होंगे, हिंदी और इतालवी दोनों तो और फिर कभी कभी प्रकाशक क्या बोलेगा कि ये महंगा भी हो जाएगा और कितने लोग हैं जो मूल टेक्स्ट पढ़ सकते हैं। तो अंत में सिर्फ अनुवाद छप जाता है, ठीक है।
मेरा सवाल ये था कि जो गुण है, जैसे अगर मैं तुलसीदास पढ़ना चाह रहा हूँ और अवधि में पढ़ूं तो जो चीज़ मुझे अवधि में समझ आ रही है अगर उसको इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन में पढ़ रहा हूँ तो वो चीज़ मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही या मैं मिस करता हूँ कुछ वहाँ पे। तो मैं कह रहा हूँ कि हम ऐसा क्या करें या अनुवादक वो क्या करे कि जहाँ तक मूल जो गुण है, जो कविता की मूल अभिव्यक्ति है वो ट्रांसलेशन में पहुंचे।
लेकिन आप कौन सा अनुवाद कर रहे हैं, हिंदी से कि मतलब अवधि से कि अंग्रेजी से?
जो भी सोर्स लैंग्वेज है उससे हम जो भी टारगेट लैंग्वेज है उसमें ट्रांसलेशन कर रहे हैं। जो भी सोर्स लैंग्वेज है उससे जो हम टारगेट लैंग्वेज में कर रहे हैं तो कविताओं में ये जो मुख्यतः रहते हैं कि वो गुण नहीं आ पाता है। टेक्स्ट में तो हम आवश्यक उपादान रखकर काम चला लेते हैं लेकिन कविताओं में ऐसा नहीं आ पाता है। तो मैं ये जानना चाह रहा था कि अनुवादक को कविताओं में खासकर ट्रांसलेशन करते वक्त क्या परेशानियां आती है और किस तरह वो उन परेशानियों से बच के एक बेहतर अनुवाद प्रस्तुत कर सकता है।
क्या परेशानी होती है ये हमने डिस्कस किया कि ये, लेकिन पोएट्री और प्रोज के लिए ये प्रॉब्लम जो रिदम ध्वनि जो ये भी होता है प्रोज में, तो कविता में क्यों अलग होगा? मुझे मेरे समझ में नहीं आता। मतलब कविता ठीक है अलग चीज है क्योंकि उसमें रिदम है, राइम है, जो ध्वनि है, ये गद्य में भी होता है। तो शायद मैं आपकी बात नहीं समझ पाती क्योंकि मैं ये नहीं मानती कि फर्क होता है। हाँ मुश्किल है, लेकिन मुश्किल है ये भी मुश्किल है, ये प्रोज है पोइट्री नहीं, लेकिन क्या फर्क पड़ता है? वो ही प्रॉब्लम्स है कि मैं इतालवी भाषा में मतलब जो मीनिंग है ठीक है उसको डालना है, लेकिन ध्वनि भी, रिदम भी, जो ये भी डालना है। तो ये पोइट्री में है और गद्य में भी है। गद्य का मतलब नहीं है कि इसमें सिर्फ अर्थ होता है कि मीनिंग होता है, ये कभी नहीं होता। वो हमेशा होता है कि हम जब अनुवाद करते हैं ये पूरे जो टेक्स्ट में जो लेयर्स होते हैं उसको दूसरी भाषा में रिक्रिएट करने की कोशिश करेंगे। ये पोएट्री का प्रॉब्लम क्या होता है कि पोएट्री में कभी कभी जो आम भाषा है वो नहीं होता है, दूसरे रजिस्टर होता है। जैसे कि आप तुलसी में अवधि है तो मानक हिंदी नहीं होता है। तो आप लेकिन क्या ये जो मैंने एक मिनट क्योंकि जो मैंने आपको दिखाया क्या वो मानक हिंदी होता है? नहीं। तो और ये पोएट्री नहीं होता है। और फिर एक और क्योंकि कभी कभी हम ठीक है पोएट्री हम सोचते हैं कि कुछ पता नहीं कि पोएट्री पवित्र चीज होती है। पोएट्री पवित्र नहीं होती है। पोएट्री एक जॉनर है और आप सोचेंगे कि ठीक है पोएट्री का अनुवाद नहीं हो सकता है। ये क्रोचे ने ये सोचा, लेकिन इस तरह के टेक्स्ट जैसे कि रित समाधि उसका भी अनुवाद नहीं हो सकता है क्योंकि मतलब ये क्रिएटिव होना चाहिए। तो आप जब पोएट्री का अनुवाद करेंगे थोड़ा सा क्रिएटिव बनेंगे तो ठीक होगा, क्रिएटिव नहीं होंगे तो क्या करेंगे कि हर एक शब्द का मीनिंग दे देंगे। लेकिन आप यदि हर एक शब्द का मीनिंग दे देंगे और एक उपन्यास का अनुवाद करेंगे तो जो रूसी टेक्स्ट था उसी तरह का अनुवाद होगा कि इसमें कोई अर्थ नहीं है। इसीलिए मैं ये नहीं मानती कि पोएट्री और गद्य में इतना फर्क होता है। लेकिन आजकल चूंकि जैसे कि बहुत उपन्यास कहानियां हैं जिसमें ये पोएटिकल प्रोज होता है, प्रूस्ट। लेकिन जैसे कि आप जब हिंदी के साहित्य में उपन्यास शुरू हुआ तो उस समय बहुत कुछ नमूने हैं जिसमें पोएटिकल प्रोज होता है। हाँ, आई एम सॉरी, मतलब मैं ये नहीं मानती कि गद्य और कविता से इतना बड़ा फर्क होता है। हम ये बाइनरी बनाएंगे तो हमेशा बाइनरीज में होंगे। तो ये इससे और आगे जाना है कि हमारा जो अनुवाद है इसका मतलब क्या है, हम क्यों अनुवाद कर रहे हैं।
धन्यवाद करना डॉक्टर अरिहंत जी हैं, पर्शियन पढ़ाते हैं
जी। अलेसंद्रा,
पहले दिन से शिकायत है कि कुछ पर्शियन के बारे में नहीं लगता।
नहीं, हम मेरा मैम आज भी पर्शियन से ही क्वेश्चन है कि हम हमेशा इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन और ट्रांसलेशन को, अच्छा इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन को ही देखकर अभी पोइट्री और में भी प्रोज की बात कर रहे हैं। वहीं हम देख रहे हैं कि हरिवंश राय बच्चन वो पूरा का पूरा उमर खयाम के रुबाई को ट्रांसलेट करके वो इतने बड़े शायर बन गए हैं और हम उसकी बात नहीं करते हैं। और ट्रांसलेशन में जब भी हम एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं तो इंग्लिश का लेते हैं, जबकि हमेशा जो एग्जाम्पल होना चाहिए हमारे अपने का। क्यों हम 17वीं शताब्दी की बात करते हैं, हम उसके पहले शताब्दी की बात क्यों नहीं करते हैं? तो बस सर, सॉरी, फिर से मेरा वही क्वेश्चन रहा कि पर्शियन को आप लोगों ने इग्नोर कर दिया।
देखिए, आपको तो धन्यवाद देना है, ये
धन्यवाद देना है,
सवाल के साथ साथ आपको धन्यवाद देना था। आप बैठिए, मैं आपकी बात का जवाब देता। देखिए, पहले भी पिछले किसी दिन के सेशन में मैंने आपको खास करके संकेत करते हुए ये कहा था कि आज दुनिया की किसी भी भाषा में यदि पंचतंत्र का अनुवाद है तो उसका श्रेय पर्शियन को जाता है। और पर्शियन से कहाँ तक हम बच पाएंगे? रामायण महाभारत का सारा अनुवाद पहले पर्शियन में हुआ, किसी दूसरी भाषाओं में तो हुआ नहीं। नल दमयंती का हुआ, लीलावती का हुआ। तो अब पहले या दूसरे या तीसरे दिन, मुझे याद नहीं है कि कब आपसे निवेदन किया, आपने पहले ही दिन इस बात की चर्चा की थी कि पर्शियन को इग्नोर किया गया। ऐसा नहीं है। ये 10 दिनों के इस कार्यक्रम की एक सीमा थी। उस सीमा में यदि 10 दिन के 10 एक्सपर्ट अलग से बुलाए जाते तो अकेले मैम के आने और जाने में जो खर्च है, ये इतना खर्च भारत सरकार से हमें आप दिला दीजिए। हम रोज पर्शियन पर ही भिन्न भिन्न विद्वानों को बुलाकर बात करेंगे। और एक बात और बता दूं, ये हाँ, ये इनको बता चुका हूं कि देखिए, ये बड़ी मुश्किल से वो एक बड़े काम की नींव ये शिवानी, ये विकास और कहाँ गए वो ऋषिपाल, इन तीनों के अथक मेहनत से बाकी स्टूडेंट्स ने भी सहयोग किया है। और सबसे बड़ा सहयोग भारत सरकार का है कि उन्होंने थोड़े से धन दिए कि मैडम के 10 दिनों के लगातार व्याख्यान हमारे बच्चे सुन रहे हैं। अगला कोई एक आने दीजिए, हो सकता है हम उस पर भी चर्चा करेंगे। और ये आपने जो गद्य और पद्य के लिए मित्र सवाल किया, ऐसा अनुवाद का उद्देश्य तय होना चाहिए, विधा नहीं। विधा तो वह उद्देश्य पूरा करने के लिए आपको जिस विधा की चीज हो जाए, आप में मैडम ने शुरू ही किया है आज, थोड़ा सा झक्की, थोड़ा सा धर्मधर, आप अनुवाद के धर्म को समझें, अनुवादक के धर्म को समझें कि क्यों उसको अनुवाद करना है और किस चीज का अनुवाद करना है। थोड़ा सा झक्कीपन तो अनुवादक में रहता है, नहीं रहता तो कल ही आनंद स्वरूप वर्मा का क्या सुनाया, हम नहीं करेंगे, नहीं करेंगे तो नहीं करेंगे। आप चले जाइए रांची, वहाँ के जो रिक्शा वाले सब होते हैं, ट्रैवल सब, किसी को पूछिए कि भाई फिरालाल चौक चलोगे, नहीं जाएंगे। अब एक बार उसके मुंह से निकल गया नहीं जाएंगे, तो अब आप उसको करोड़ रुपया दे दीजिए, वो नहीं जाएगा। और जहां का किराया 2 रुपया होना चाहिए उसने 20 कह दिया, तो अब आप उसको काट के गाड़ दीजिएगा, वहां वो 19.5 नहीं लेगा, वो 20 ही लेगा। और उसके मुंह से निकल गया कि 2 रुपया लेंगे, वहां का किराया 32 रुपया होना चाहिए, तो 2 में ही पहुंचाएगा। ये इस तरह का झक्कीपन मैडम ने चर्चा भी की कि वो आदिवासी देवता वाला जो मामला है कि देवता पहले तो देवता को सुमिरता है और सुमिरन करने के बाद देवता उसमें चला जाता है, तब वह जो बोलता है वो देवता ही बोलता है। तो ये सारी बातें हैं। तो आप ये जब कभी मैडम आई हैं तो इनके पास जो भाषा धन है, उन्हीं भाषा धन से ये अपनी बात कहेंगी, मैं अपने ही भाषा धन से कहूँगा। तो आप इत्मीनान रखिए, हम अनुवाद के लोग, आप भी उस भाषा से हैं, हम संयोग से 2 ही अध्यापक हैं अनुवाद में, पर हमारी ईमानदारी पर ये विश्वास रखिए कि अनुवाद कर्म जो है हमारा, वो केवल कर्म नहीं है, हमारा धर्म भी है, हमारी चेतना भी है। और हम इस मामले में पूरी तरह ईमानदार हैं कि हम कोई भाषाई राजनीति नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम अनुवाद की राजनीति कर रहे हैं।
मार्च में इनका एक लेक्चर अनाउंस कर दीजिए आप।
और ये एक सूचना और दे दूं, अभी कोरोना में हमारे बच्चों ने मिल करके, बल्कि उसमें हम दोनों का योगदान कम है, हमारे बच्चों का योगदान ज़्यादा है, कि उसने एक सीरीज चलाया। उस सीरीज में हमारी इच्छा थी कि इसमें जितने ऑनलाइन भाषण, राधा वल्लभ त्रिपाठी, वो सारे बौद्ध साहित्य, कितने लोगों का उसमें भाषण कराया है। अब तो ये इस कार्यक्रम का ही इतनी बड़ी संपत्ति हमें हो गई कि इसमें तो किताब हो जाएगी। मगर उसमें जो हम सोचते थे, तो पर्शियन और अरबिक में आकर ही हमारी गाड़ी अटक गई कीचड़ में। वो जैसे रेत में समाधि जो है, समाधि का पहिया रेत में घुस गया, वहाँ कीचड़ में घुस गया। क्योंकि कभी आसिफ ने समय नहीं दिया, कभी ये मजहर आसिफ ने, कभी अखला काहन ने, और उसके बाद जो उदासीनता आ गई, कई सप्ताह तक, कई महीने तक टलने के बाद, अब इसी मार्च महीने में आप ये पर्शियन अनुवाद परंपरा पर 1-2 घंटे के लेक्चर की तैयारी आप आज से शुरू कर दीजिए, और वो हम वचन देते हैं कि हम कराएंगे। क्योंकि आपका व्याख्यान कराने के लिए हमें सुविधा ये है कि हमें तो चाय का भी खर्च नहीं लगेगा। 2 बजे शुरू करेंगे, 5 बजे 6 बजे जब तक मन होगा इसी हॉल में करेंगे, डेट हमें मिल ही जाएगा, सब कुछ हो जाएगा। बच्चे अपना बाहर जाकर या तो हम पिला देंगे चाय, नहीं तो अपने से पी लेंगे, और हम आपको पिला देंगे। ठीक है, आइए आप धन्यवाद दीजिए। हाँ, आप ये व्याख्यान देंगे।
जैसा कि हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि अब समापन की ओर जा रहे हैं, मैं भी कल इस सीरीज़ का लास्ट लेक्चर है। लेक्चर तो आज ही ख़त्म है, कल तो सिर्फ आदान और प्रदान है। तो उन सारी चीज़ों को लेकर आज मैम का, अलीसंद्रा मैम का आज आखिरी लेक्चर जो था वो लगभग ख़त्म हो चुका है। हाँ, ख़त्म हो गया है। तो अलीसंद्रा मैम, आपके बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आपके उत्कृष्ट ज्ञान देने के लिए। थैंक यू मैम, थैंक यू। और मैम को सिर्फ हिंदी विभाग की तरफ से नहीं, हम यहाँ पे चूँकि यहाँ बहुत सारे अलग अलग डिपार्टमेंट से लोग आए हुए हैं, खासकर उधर कुछ हिस्ट्री से आए हुए हैं, मैं खुद फारसी से ही हूँ, कुछ कोरियाई डिपार्टमेंट से आए हुए हैं। हर डिपार्टमेंट की तरफ से मैम आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई। थैंक यू मैम। और इस कार्यक्रम को आयोजन कराने में गंगा सर, अच्छा तो ठीक सर, कोई बात नहीं, गंगा सर और नवीन सर को बहुत बहुत बधाई। और इस कार्यक्रम में संलग्न सारे बच्चे जो सर के साथ दिन रात लगे हुए हैं, उनको बहुत बहुत बधाई। और हम लोग अब चाय की ओर अग्रसर होते हैं, मिलते हैं 10 मिनट 15 मिनट के बाद।